Hello, this is Jer. I'm playing Oxygen Not Included. This is going to be the highlights of the Oasisse playthrough. And I'm going to spin this around until I get some traits that I like. Okay, so what I found is Geode's large glaciers is going to be really hot, so this will be a big advantage, and geoactive and metal rich. So the main challenge here is going to be the intense amount of heat that's going to be around the base. And let's see if I survive. Standard selection for dupe, scientist, miner, and engineer. And they've got a quick learning and immune to food poisoning. Well, I don't really care about that, but engineer has supplying and operating, so they can give some automation later on in the game. No one has the Metatronics engineering skill off the bat, but I'm not too worried about this. In this playthrough, it's mainly temperature that I'm concerned about. So let's look around. I'm going to pause this. Look around, and it looks like 22 degrees on the spot. Lots of wild plants, no algae. So I'll have to adapt oxygen early on. But yeah, very hot spots all around me. And that is going to be the challenge for trying to survive this cluster. As with all my playthroughs, I'm starting off the end of cycle 1 with a latrine and a barracks for my 3 dupes. So they have a place to use the washroom and a place to sleep. But I'm not sleeping well because I can see some hot temperatures on the southern part of my base, and I'm sure this thing exists for every other section. All right, further down cycle 2, I have research station. I'm not producing oxygen, but I do have power and research going on. I'm going to be expanding the number of dupes nearly as quickly, but I am going to take a dupe early on. I'm going to call this one Mole because they like to dig. They also have mole hands, hence their name Mole. So let's have a quick look at the skills that I'm assigning. Oh, Mole's the only one. They can dig through granite now. That's going to help out a little bit. That's cycle 4, and I now have a great haul for my 4 dupes. So that's going to give a morale bonus for any time that they go and eat there at the end of the day. If you've seen any of my other playthroughs, this is where things get different. I'm building a vacuum layer between my base and the rest of the asteroid, in particular the hot zone. What I'm essentially doing is protecting myself from all that heat. I don't have any algae, so I'm relying on an electrolyzer and water to produce oxygen. Of course, it's going to make a little bit of hydrogen as well, but I'll deal with that later on. I can't rely on the little bit of oxidite that I have because it's been used up. There's a second body of water down here, and it's a good temperature at the moment, 23 degrees or so, but it is surrounded by a hot zone, and it's making me nervous. So I want to bring that up, just protecting it from taking on heat, so I'm not pumping in hot water later on. While that pump is doing its thing, I'm continuing the process of expanding my vacuum protection between myself, or my base, and the rest of the asteroid. Going diagonal helps a little bit as I'm doing this, just to make the build easier, because I want to concentrate on some other things. So at this point, I'm just continuing the process of building this vacuum all around my base. I'm hoping that I can fully complete this thing using abyssalite. There, no need to make a vacuum where that exists, but hoping to have that done before working on any other priorities. Taking a little bit of time to make a fire pole that's going to help dupes transport themselves a little bit quicker. So here it is. I now have a vacuum layer all around my base. This is protecting the hot temperatures from coming in. It definitely does not mean that I'm going to survive at this point, but it's going to buy me a lot of time. If I didn't do this, then I'm certainly going to have a lot less time. I want to have a cooling-based system that I can be able to survive, but I do still have to get out here, so I will have to choose a spot to exit to get some other advanced materials that'll allow me to survive long term. It didn't take too long to decide to risk breaking that vacuum, at least temporarily, and for the purpose of looking for a geyser. I'm particularly hoping for a cold salt or cold slush. That would help quite a bit. This is salt water, 95 degrees. Not very helpful, but I'll keep expanding and see. I'll block that off so it doesn't fill up, and see if I can find any other ones that might be more helpful. So I've discovered an area that is actually pretty decent temperature-wise, 30 degrees, but compared to the 70, 80 degrees, that's pretty decent. What I'm doing is I'm actually expanding the vacuum layer between my base and making a channel between that in this zone over here, so I can actually get my dupes to expand and go in there without taking on the temperature on either side of that channel. This is exciting. I've discovered my first glacier, so a frozen zone over there, minus 40 or so degrees. It's hot all around it, but if I can just get my dupes to go be able to dig through that without passing out, that may be very beneficial. So I'm expanding down this is the southern part of my base going towards this glacier. I'm watching my dupes very closely so that they don't get heat stroke, because if they do, or they get towards that, I'm going to cancel this and wait till they cool off before I have them go back down. So they're making good progress. The sand is quick to dig through. The disadvantage is it falls down. There's some dupes that are getting close to heat stroke, so it's making me nervous, but we're getting pretty close, and as long as they can poke into the cold zone, that cold zone will have a cooling effect on the hot area, which just might make this more manageable. It is, if I can just get my dupes in that cold zone, they can continue to dig in there without the risk of heat stroke. It is much worse to have a very hot place than a cold place. I've gotten actually quite lucky here. This cold zone, or this glacier, is sitting on top of some oil and lead. That's going to allow me to mine those things as well as fossils, and mine them without really hot temperatures. That little bit of oil will produce some plastic, which is going to be a requirement for cooling using a steam turbine. I was a little bit worried about that spot getting hot in the future, so I'm deciding to take the cooler crude oil out now, store it for use later on, rather than trying to get it later when it may already be too hot for me to be able to get easily. I now have a nature reserve. This is going to give me a +6 morale bonus just from my dupes walking through it when they go in and out of the barracks. There isn't a lot of oxygen in that glacier area, so I've got some gas masks set up with a pump that's filtering for oxygen, so that oxygen goes into those gas masks. I've even upgraded my power to be heavy watt wires. That's not going to make my base pretty, but I don't really care about that. It's all about survival until later on in this game. I also found an additional zone that is around 35 degrees that I can expand into. I've upgraded it to a washroom. This is going to allow my dupes to not need to spend time clearing out outhouses. So I've expanded in both the up and bottom part of my base. I found a zone over here that is not protected from abyssalite, so I'm going to create a vacuum here just to protect this area from getting too hot. In the southern part of my base, I found some geysers. One of them actually is a saltwater geyser just in the open. Well, it's not going to really help. Another one down here, it's also saltwater geyser. So I've got 3 of them at 95 degrees. That is not super helpful game. Another one down here, hydrogen. Again, not extremely useful at this point for me. Another geyser, I temporarily opened up this area so they can go in. It's hot polluted oxygen. Yeah, 60 degrees, not terrible temperature, but not really that useful. I'll just close it up and ignore it for the time being. Another saltwater geyser in the western part of my base, so I went in and expanded to find this. Looks like a saltwater. Is that going to be the 4th one? No, this is brine at minus 10 degrees. Okay. That is very good news. So I do have at least 1 geyser. Notice I'm digging out in an area such that I'm avoiding getting that sand falling on top of me. But now that I have this over here, steam vent 500 degrees. Yeah, no thank you. Let's dig out a spot for that cold brine to come into, because it's a 60 plus degrees in this area. That cold brine will have a cooling effect, and later on I'll be able to use that cooler salt water for producing oxygen and going into my washroom. I'm relying on mealwood for food. That's going to have an issue when I run out of dirt, so I started to build this spot here for pips, and of the first few pips in there, they have the arbor trees, which is awesome because it's self-feeding system. So the pips will produce eggs, and I'll be able to use that to get meat. I've decided it's really important to have a material research station to be able to research some advanced stuff, such as solar panels and steam turbines. That's going to be how I'll survive medium to long term in this game. I wish I had some solar panels right now because it's not the material research station, but it's actually the generator, the red bolt generator, that's taking a lot of power. So I have 3 different manual generators. I've set up several jumbo batteries around the base and getting that to fill the material research station. And I'm just concentrating on researching the 2 main things. Basically, I want to produce glass and I want solar panels and steam turbines. And once that is done, this will turn off. I also have this set up so it can tell the generator and the radiation lamp to turn off when the machine is full. It is time to set another dupe. This one is an animal lover, so I'm going to call them Animal. They're going to be spending a lot of time in the pips, making sure they're happy, groomed, and producing a lot of eggs for food. I've added some automation into the pip stables. My engineer now has the ability to do automation. I've got the research behind it, and you can see some eggs are being dropped into this room on the left. That's a hatchery and a place for the cook to be able to produce some food. I'm generally not showing the research for this set of highlights, but I figured that this one's pretty important. I've completed the research for both solar panels, steam turbines, and production of glass. That is going to be really nice. My first water area has been dried up. I might as well get rid of this pump. And I'm starting to look for another one. I've got one over here that I can start to. It's going to be very important that I keep this going. This is what keeps my washroom running as well as my oxygen. The hydrogen buildup has been getting bad, so I built a pump up here. It tells it whether it detects hydrogen or not, and if so, it runs the pump. We'll put it through a filter and burn it in a hydrogen generator. It even has a smart battery to tell it to run only when power is needed. But power is needed quite often, so that's not really going to be a big problem. With solar panels, I want to get to the top of the base, and this section here has been the most difficult. I'm just very cautious that I don't want to have a dupe pass out. So just making sure I cancel my tasks when they become close to heat stroke and make sure they get out of that zone before they fully get affected by it. So the overall temperature of the base is actually pretty good. You can see the electrolyzer is producing a little bit of heat. That's not a big surprise. A little bit of heat is rising from the top. But this is going to give me plenty of time to do some advanced stuff. You can see that the dupes, I have this medical area because they are taking heat stroke. So I've also discovered an area, now this is in the southern part of my base. I've got an aluminum volcano, not really useful to me, but I have some water that is actually of a decent temperature. Again, I'm scared of it getting too hot, so I'm pumping it and storing it inside my base so I know it's going to be a good temperature, and this is also essential for oxygen. So the dupe that can dig through abyssalite, I'm sure, has not been happy with me because they've been near heat stroke for quite a while, but I finally got through it, and now I can get my dupes to work on the process of getting to the top of the base where I can build some solar panels. Since I'm going to be at the top of the base soon, I'm going to want some glass, so I made a glass forge here. I'm actually not going to run it until I get to the top of the base because I actually discovered some glass tiles that I've destroyed, and I'm going to turn those into solar panels, collecting energy before I turn the glass forge on. I've been on the hunt for some unique materials, gold magma. That is a good temperature range for a material. I also want some clay because I ultimately want to turn that into ceramic. It's a good insulator. I now have a zone to produce ceramic. Ceramic is going to be used on top of the steam turbines to help prevent heat from going from the really hot zone below it to above. So lots of ceramic is needed. A little bit of refined carbon as well for future steel. The first solar panels have been created, and this is a blessing. And actually produce this just from glass that I found around the base. So I haven't even run the glass forge yet. But this is going to help reduce the amount of time my dupes spend on the manual generators, which has really been annoying me. I found a buddy plant here and I put it in a central spot in the base, so that's going to have a small effect on reducing stress for my dupes. I know my dupes aren't allergic to it. Another glacier around oil. This is really good news. I'm also decided that I'm going to use this ice as a place to run my metal refinery. So I can produce some steel. And steel is going to be absolutely essential for the cooling process because my aqua tuner and some of the other stuff will be needed to made out of steel. Also, spore plant is in existence, so I want to dig that out right away and store it here so my pip does not get access to it. Most of the time you're going to be responsible for exploring the base to find some rare materials, but I got thimbleweed seed given to me as a gift, so I'm certainly going to print that, and that's going to allow me to make some Atmo suits. I would have built a filtration system to turn polluted water back into regular water, but I just have too many other priorities. I've got 3 liquid reservoirs filled with water. I've got a storage bin there for storing ceramic and gold magma. Whoops, I better get rid of those wires that could overload. But I've got now heavy watt wires that go down here because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have my metal refinery that I put in here with a little bit of automation and bin and all that, with the plumbing to be able to actually send hot liquid back into that ice zone. And that will slowly over time heat up that ice, but I'm going to get a little bit of steel that I'm going to ultimately turn into a cooling system. So that's really important. I've also turned the glass forge on, which allowed me to expand the number of solar panels. It's going to be very helpful now that I get a refinery. Carbon dioxide has been building up at the bottom of the base, so I've got some oxygen ferns. They require water, but that's going to help reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that has been building up down here. One of the things that I'm going to want is lime, and I've got a lot of fossil, so I'm going to turn fossil into that lime with a rock crusher, and that's going to allow me ultimately to produce steel. So even though the world is quite hot, there's actually quite a few zones that you can still explore. I even found thimbleweed seeds, which is, if I didn't have them printed, then I would have been able to survive with that. Also have some iron ore. I need that for producing iron, which is going to produce steel. And I found out that the amount of fossil that I dug out previously was not enough for creating the amount of lime that I need. So I started digging out some more fossils to produce the lime that I need for steel. This brine geyser has been running for a while. It is a moderate cooling effect. Well, I say moderate, it used to be 70 degrees or so. It's 40 degrees at the moment, so it's doing pretty decent. Also have some thimbleweed seeds that is getting rid of the polluted water that comes out of the washroom. And that, ultimately I want to create that in a filter, but that'll be later on. My main concern overall is the temperature, so I'm just doing another temperature check here. It's 24, 25 degrees in a lot of places, so it is actually we're doing quite well. I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to survive. I do need absolutely a cooling station to be able to survive medium long term though. So I do need plastic, so I have an oil refinery. I'm converting some of that oil that I have saved up earlier, pushing that through the refinery and into the polymer press. That's going to give me plastic, which will allow me to build some steam turbines. Even abyssalite can be a bad insulator if it's already been heated up, as is in this case. So I'm actually going to dig out this spot underneath it, creating a vacuum, giving some protection. I've got 2 places to dump crude oil and petroleum to send into the 2 different locations. So if they've been soaked up somewhere in the world, they can still be used. Anytime I discover water somewhere in the world that's a decent temperature, 32 degrees down here, I make a priority of getting it into the base, store it somewhere, because that is future oxygen and continued use of my washroom. So I'm building liquid reservoirs in random places around my base. I just want to store as much of that stuff as I possibly can. So it turns out I did not have enough crude oil for the amount of petroleum and plastic that I want to create. So I've got a little area of water that I have a pump sending into a oil well, and that's going to produce the amount of crude oil. That is going to produce hot material, but it's around a glacier, which is very helpful for me. I now have a pump that is sending the crude oil from this zone over here into the base, slowly making its way to the oil refinery. So not only do I have the crude oil that I actually produce from the oil well, but I actually found more crude oil in the southern part of my base that's a decent temperature. So I'm pumping that in as well. I've got power down there, so I actually even cleared it off from some water and polluted water, so I don't have to filter it, which is an added bonus. And those two sources are converging. Now I better make a change here, and that's going to converge towards the oil refinery to produce petroleum. This is the start of my all-important cooling system that's going to allow me to survive. I'm producing a little bit of ethanol. The purpose for that is ethanol can get really cold, so I can actually create a freezer to store my food such that it will last forever with the help of my cooling system. I've regularly been checking the temperature of my base because it is very hot around me. However, despite the fact it's mostly just the heat that's being produced from machinery that's going into my base and just a little bit from the few holes that are poking around. The cooling system is not operational, but I'm feeling confident enough to take on a new dude. This one's going to be called Artist. Got various different skills and they'll join the team. Things are looking really well with my pips producing food and lots of water for oxygen, so I'm feeling confident in bringing on an additional dupe. This is taking me up to 7. Probably wait here for I have my cooling system before I take on any more dupes. So I've been running this cooling system for a little bit, and now I have almost negative 32 degrees in those tiles that's acting as the cooling. So I have conveyor belts that are running ingredients and cooked barbecue meat through that, such that my ingredients and food are never going to go bad. So I'll start to have a surplus of food rather than always just having enough. So that is going to make survival a lot easier going forward. With the food situation pretty much handled with the pips and deep freezer, I've built a oxygen system that is separate from the base, so the hydrogen doesn't go into the overall base. I have 2 filters, and I actually have 2 oxygen lines that run through the various different sections of my base, so I'm going to get a lot of oxygen. And I'm diverting all the water that I've stored in various liquid reservoirs into that, along with some water that just happened to be underneath the oxygen system. So that's going to produce a little bit of heat, but I also have the base cooling system up here with some aluminum pipes that is actually going to keep that cool, so the oxygen that goes into the base will also be cool. Medium to long term, all I really need at this point is a source of water, because once those liquid reservoirs run up, I'm going to run into a problem, but I have a brine geyser, so all I really need is this desalinizer that's producing some water, that's sending that water into the washrooms, as well as this new oxygen system, so oxygen is going to be good. With food, oxygen, and base cooling solved, I can pretty much feel confident that I'm going to survive, both medium and long term, whatever my goals are for the base. The meantime, I just need to manually kill or attack some pips, but even that will be automated as they die off naturally. I've got a freezer here for storing the ingredients. When cooked, turns that into barbecue meat. That gets stored. That heat system here handles heating from 2 aquatuners, as well as that metal refinery. Again, oxygen system is jammed full of oxygen, and with that saltwater geyser, I'm not going to have any problems with that running out of oxygen or food. So let's have a look. Let's go to the top of the base. I've had time to actually expand the solar panels to go all the way left of my base. A little bit of room if I start to need more power on the right, but I can expand there later on. And finally, let's look at temperature. So I've got ugly wires all around, but looking at temperature, I'm actually taking on some really cold spots. I've made my polluted water 5 degrees, which I'm not going to run forever. This is just kind of for now. And I'll be able to actually keep the base cool, and I actually will be able to use that excess cooling to cool off some of the areas around the base so I can expand. I can easily get to the top of the base, go into space. So food, oxygen, cooling, I really don't see anything getting in my way from this point from being able to expand. I expect I'll be able to take on another dupe soon. But I think that's going to be it. I even have some gold tiles, which is not necessary for survival, but a little bit of decoration, just showing off the fact that I could do that. That's going to be it. Thanks for watching, and see you in a future video.